gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Legends of Novus, designed by Wesley Woodbury. Legends of Novus is a relatively straightforward game, particularly in solo. In the solo mode for this game, your goal is to, in under 25 turns, defeat 3 of the quest monsters around the edge of the board, and to complete a quest event. Those can be found in these card decks sometimes. For example, here's a quest with instructions for how to complete it. On every turn, you're going to choose between 2 basic things: you can travel or explore. So when you travel, you can go up to 2 little spaces on the map, and then once you've done that, you're going to roll the travel die and complete the action that it tells you to complete. This one means safe travels and allows you to travel further or collect treasure. Cross swords means that you get to have an encounter and have a fight at this location. A treasure box means rewards, so you can draw from the rewards deck. And an adventure symbol means you can draw from the adventure deck. Most of the good loot you get throughout the game is going to come from these adventure and reward decks, so it behooves you to sift through them as much as possible. At the beginning of the game, you'll get a bit of starting equipment, so this time I drew a Sword of Exire and a Gladiator Arena event. As you draw cards, you might get really helpful equipment, but more on that in a moment. If you choose to explore, then you're going to check this location guide that will give you specific information about where you are. Some locations contain battles, some have special perks if you're a certain class or have a special affinity with that location, and others contain special surprises that you will find here in the location guide. If you choose to explore in a non-explorer location, then what you basically do is you flip over the top of the rewards or the adventure deck. Be careful though, there might be enemies in here. It's not just the encounter deck that contains your opponents. No matter what you do in the game, you're going to want to go through these decks. They contain equipment, special events, treasure, and enemies that you need to fight in order to gain experience. Some of the things that you gain from these decks will be equipment that you can't actually use depending on your class symbol. If that happens, then you're able to sell off equipment that you don't want for treasure. If you think the equipment might help you, there's plenty of slots to set it up in. So you have weapons, body slot, head slot, sections for skills and items, and for footwear. Most of the equipment that you draw is going to help you with your combat value, which is one of the key numbers in the game. You're usually going to want to just reset your combat value to nothing and recalculate it every time you have a combat. You're always going to have a base combat value that's based on your experience, so you start with 3 experience and automatically have a combat value. And then these shields that are on various cards of yours are going to give you some extra combat value to work with. The more experience you get and the better your equipment is, the higher your combat value will be, which is pretty key when you're getting into fights, especially with quest monsters. When you get in a battle, you're essentially pitting your combat value against their combat value, but you're also each rolling a die in order to add a bit of randomness to the outcome. So you're going to want to stack your combat value as high as you can to ensure your odds of success when you roll a d10 against your enemies. The more quickly you manage to ramp up your character's powers and succeed against 3 of these quest monsters, the more likely you are to finish in 15 turns or less and become a Legend of Novus. There are other titles that you can get depending on how long it takes, but again, in a solo game, if you go beyond 25 turns, you lose the game. In the multiplayer version of the game, it's also a bit of a race. You are looking to be the first player to get 25 experience points and to beat either 1 quest creature or 3 quest events. So you and the other players will be racing around the board to achieve these things as quickly as possible. And that's the very bare bones overview of Legends of Novus. Essentially, you move around the board, draw cards, decide what to do with those cards, and then when you feel you're sufficiently leveled up for a combat, you go and fight monsters on the edge of the board. So now for some final thoughts. I think there's a lot to appreciate about Legends of Novus. A lot of thought went into the world building, and I think the place where you see it the most is in the art. The art pieces for this game are really beautiful and varied, and they really give you a feel for this world that the designer has created. The game also has a lot of flavor text that indicates a lot of thought was put into what Novus is like as a world and as lore. There's also quite a bit of variety among the different reward and adventure cards. There are a lot of creepy monsters in the encounters. And every game is going to play out a bit differently because based on your die roll, you'll be able to do different things at different locations. The other major pro of Legends of Novus is that it is short. This game is 60 to 90 minutes on the box, but the solo game is going to be a lot shorter. I would say maybe 45 minutes or so, especially once you already know what you're doing. So if you want a very quick gaming experience, but you still want a fantasy adventure, then Legends of Novus does have you covered on that front. That said, Legends of Novus is not quite do it for me. I do want to mention that some of the components feel a little bit cheap, like the cards are really easy to damage, so a lot of money went into the art but not necessarily a whole lot went into the physical production of everything in the box. For me, that's a really minor quibble. My major one is that in this game, I don't think that there's quite enough decision space for the player. Way too much in this game is determined by just the roll of a die, with not a whole lot that you can do to modify it. Even what you can do in each location is limited by a die roll. And your choices are pretty much just limited to where you'll move, which cards you'll draw from which decks, when to play certain events that do make it into your hand, and what equipment to keep or to sell. To me, those kinds of choices feel a little bit more passive, and I would have liked to feel like more of an active participant in my character's evolution from kind of nobody to serious godlike fighter, which does happen over the course of the game. In the solo game, things can be even more frustrating because in order to win, you have to defeat 3 quest creatures, but you also have to complete 1 quest event, which means that you have to draw one. So even though you're being judged on how quickly you can complete the game, so you have a turn limit, you are going to be restricted by what you can pull out of the deck, not by how much skill you actually have in your quest to become a Legend of Novus. If you don't care about that, the game is beautiful and you can have a pretty quick zero to hero fantasy experience. And if that's what you're looking for, then Legends of Novus might do it for you. But for me, it felt more like an interactive experience than like a full-on game where I felt like I was in control of what happened next. So with that said, for me, Legends of Novus is a 6 out of 10. Happy gaming.